All right, before we get started today, I got a couple of thanks that are in order. First off, I got to thank Stone Slick for becoming a producer-level patron, and also Chad Streeter for becoming a VIP patron on the Patreon app. If you don't know what the Patreon app is, it's a way that you can support this podcast. If you sign up, there's 4 different levels: a $5, a $10, a $25, and a $50 level. You subscribe, and you will get access to all kinds of exclusives and advance notice on things, and special podcast episodes, which will only be available to you, as well as discounts at Chop Ahead, some Big Truth podcast swag, shit like that. So check it out at patreon.com/Big Truth. Again, Patreon, patreon.com/Big Truth. And, your support is much appreciated and vital to growing this and keeping it going. So, again, utmost respect to everybody that signed up so far on Patreon. Can't thank you enough. Also, holidays are coming up. And you don't really want to you don't want your junk down there to look like a fucking, like a fucking finger sticking out of a fucking bowl of spaghetti squash, right? So I just make these shit up. I just make these motherfuckers up on the fly. So if I stutter through it or whatever, man, sorry. But yeah, man, you get what I'm getting. You don't want your junk to look like a finger sticking out of a bowl of spaghetti squash. And if you know what I'm talking about, you got to go check out manscaped.com. Black Friday's coming up. There's all kinds of deals over there. So check them out. Manscaped makes the Lawnmower 3.0, which is the world's most advanced, scientifically backed ball razor. Uses these special ceramic blades. So it's a nick, cut, abrasion, scratch, bloodletting resistant down there. So you can shave away with reckless abandon and clean up your nether regions, and you won't look like Sasquatch or a total fucking heathen. But yeah, go to manscaped.com, and they got all kinds of ball care products and all kinds of cool shit, and they have all these package deals and all kinds of ways you can save money. And holidays are coming up. Give a gift to somebody that's like a fucking walking woolly mammoth, and have them be a little more presentable down there for the holidays. Manscaped.com. And if you use the promo code Big Truth at checkout, you will get 20% off your order and free shipping. So there's a bunch of shit already on sale. So, and there's a bunch of Black Friday things going on. So check them out, manscaped.com. Use the promo code Big Truth at checkout. You'll get an extra 20% off your order and free shipping. Also, check out lawtigers.com. If you are ever in the unfortunate situation where you've been in a motorcycle accident and you need some representation, Law Tigers is a law firm that was founded by riders for riders. Again, check them out, lawtigers.com. Also, if you go on Facebook, you go to just type in Law Tigers and then whatever the name of your state is, and you will get in contact with their local office. And Instagram is at Law Tigers. Omerta. I know Omerta's having some big Black Friday sales, so make sure you go check them out at omertamia.com. OMERTAMIA. One of the best streetwear, street clothing brands out there. These dudes are legit and old friends of mine, and they got the raddest shit out there. One of the best clothing companies there is, in my humble opinion. They got all kinds of shit too. It's just not t-shirts. They got jackets, they got bags, they got socks, hoodies, whatever you need. They even do like special edition limited screen prints, like prints, like hand screened prints and stuff. All kinds of cool shit. So check them out. There's all kinds of exclusive shit. Limited shit, and then they got the standards like stop glorifying rats and all that shit, always in print. That one is, but check them out, omertamia.com. And again, if you use the promo code Big Truth at checkout there, you will also receive 20% off your order there. So you're saving money left and right. So I'm allowing you to give more for the holidays this year. Just use my promo codes at Manscaped and Omerta, and you will get 20% off your orders at both of those venues. Pitchfork, If you don't know Pitchfork, they are one of the standard clothing companies in the hardcore metal and punk rock scenes, and they've been around forever. And my boy Warren, who's paid so many dues in these scenes, is one of the guys that is running the show over there. They also do a record label with this limited edition split 7-inch series where they do a East Coast band on one side and a West Coast band on the other, and they come on all these different limited vinyl colorways. So you want to check them out at pitchforkny.com. Again, pitchforkny.com, and on all the social medias at pitchforkny, which is short for Pitchfork New York. Chop Cult is the leading kind of industry news and resource for chopper builders and motorcycle riders and online, one of the biggest online communities there is for this stuff, and you can check them out. They have a online message board that is broken up into so many different subcategories, so you can get whatever information you're specifically looking for. They also have an online swap meet where you can buy, sell, trade parts and other assorted motorcycle stuff, and you can they have an events page that lists motorcycle events going on all across the world, broken up by country and state and whatever. But you know, they're just cool, man. And the shit is absolutely free to join. So it costs you nothing. They don't ask you credit card or any of that shit. So the moment you sign on, you are part of one of the biggest motorcycle communities out there. All kinds of good information, all kinds of dumb shit just to help you pass the time, especially if we get down this rabbit hole of another round of shutdowns and you're looking for shit to do. Go look up some motorcycle tech shit or look at rad pictures of custom bikes or go look for parts and all that shit at chopcult.com and on all the social medias, simply at chopcult. And also check out Chop Ahead. We're going to be doing a Black Friday sale where we're going to do 20% off all apparel and riding gear and helmets and everything we got in the store. So whether you come in the store, it's 20% off, or if you order online at chopahead.com, which is CHOPPAHEAD.com, we greatly appreciate it. And we're a full service brick and mortar shop. So you come in here, we have a parts counter, we have a showroom, we have a big shop in the back where we do all service and repair and build custom bikes. Anything you need, from an oil change to a full custom chopper build, we will do it. Speed work, whatever. So check us out at chopahead.com. We're at 13 County Road in East Freetown, Massachusetts. So if you are not local, then, just check us out at Chop Ahead, and you will get access to a lot of the shit we got for sale. And if you don't see it, give us a call. We probably got it. And last but not least, check out bigtruthpodcast.com for more information on this podcast. And I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to this and spread the word, leave a comment, leave a review. That always helps. And without further ado, let's get into this shit right now.
Sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Yes, once again, we have liftoff. I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Big Truth Podcast, and I'm stoked to be here with my man Dave Wedge, who you may know as an author, or a New York Times best-selling author. Sorry, I think we're almost obligated to say that, right?
It's a badge of honor, so thank you. I appreciate that. Worked hard for that one.
Yeah, of course. That doesn't come easy. And then also a long-time journalist in the Boston area for the Boston Herald, amongst other... Right. Amongst, like most journalists, you I've
been around,
a breadth of magazines and newspapers and whatnot.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, I mean, if you don't know it, I'm looking at 2 of his books right here. He's made the one of the Tom Brady books. What's it called? 12.
12. Yep. 12. It's Tom Brady and his Battle for Redemption.
Yeah, and
that was the New York Times bestseller. That one that came out in 2018. And that's the story about Deflategate, kind of that whole saga. And it's a lot of people get mistaken with that one. They think it's like a Tom Brady bio, but it's really not. It's, there's a lot of biographical information in there, but it's really a story about how the league really tried to railroad Brady, and they took this little equipment violation that was Deflategate and turned it into like a capital murder case. And the book actually reads more like a courtroom thriller. It's like a drama kind of about how the league and the union battled over that case. And the backstory is really that, Brady is like this superstar and everybody knows that he's supermodel wife and he's Mr. Perfect and all that. But a lot of people don't know that Tom Brady's a big union guy. He was always there for the union whenever there was battles over the contracts and that stuff. Brady and even Peyton Manning would really go to bat for the union. So when this whole thing happened, the union had Brady's back. And if you remember, Kraft and Belichick both kind of turned their backs on Brady during Deflategate. They were like, go ask Tom, but the union was there and they battled hard for him. So that's what the story's about is the union's battle with Goodell and, the big bad NFL. And, I think the moral of the story for us is that, whether or not you like Brady or give a shit about what he did or didn't do, if the league can come down that hard on someone like him for something so minor, imagine what they can do to a player that nobody knows.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the story.
And so does that come out as well, like some other stuff, or does it just kind of more stay on the Brady story?
No, we get into a lot of the stuff with the union battles with the NFL about other cases, like we talk about Bountygate, the one down in New Orleans where, players were accused of issuing bounties to hurt guys, basically. Okay. And then there was Bullygate down in Miami. There was like some racist stuff and players were being bullied, and obviously Spygate, we talk about that. And then there was the Ray Rice case, which was kind of a really nasty case.
Yeah.
So, the union and the NFL have been battling for a long time. And really what Deflategate was all about was Goodell asserting his dominance over the league. And that's what he did. He actually, at the end of the day, the league won.
Yeah.
Brady got his revenge on the field. And that's kind of what you read about in the book is, he got his ass kicked in court, but he won on the field. He won that crazy Super Bowl that, against the Falcons, and Goodell had to hand him the trophy, and that wasn't too good of a moment for Goodell. But at the end of the day, he's the king, man.
Yeah.
Still is.
Well, the thing is, you get involved in like an industry like that, there's so much money, there's so much power play, and then there's, in football, there's a lot of alpha males, right? And so then you get the guy with the league who's got to be the head guy, the top guy, and so, just basic, it's almost just a study in basic human psychology and trying to stay on top of the food chain, because obviously the players outshine the league people, in a lot of ways, as far as popularity or whatever. And, but yeah, I mean, that's going to be, there's so much. We jumped right in, but there's so much. Let's give a little bit more background information, and then we can go into into the books, because you also have Hunting Whitey, which you have here, which was the last chapter of the story in the Whitey Bulger epic saga, and you wrote the book on the Boston bombing that became part of. Basically became the movie Patriots Day.
That's right. Yeah.
And then also, you wrote the book on the ice challenge there?
The ice bucket challenge. Pete Frates, kid from Boston College. Yeah.
And didn't that become the thing on there was that became a documentary as well?
We're working on a movie on that.
Okay.
We're still working on it. We got some. We were working with Casey Affleck on that one to try to make a film about it, but. It kind of fell apart, that project, but we have since got a new partner that we're working with. I can't really say who it is, but I'm hopeful because I love that story. The Pete Frates, for your listeners that don't know, Pete Frates was a kid from Boston College, grew up in Beverly, Massachusetts, and he got ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And when I started writing the book, I didn't know anything about ALS, but I learned quick. And him and his family basically said, you know what, there's no cure, no treatment for this disease, and it's unacceptable. We're going to find a way to fight it. And Pete said right from the beginning, he's like, I'm going to find a way to get this to Bill Gates, people like that with like deep pockets that can fix this disease or find a cure. So he kind of stumbled upon other people doing the Ice Bucket Challenge for, raising money for cancer or raising money for like the local animal hospital. Some people doing it on social media. And one of his ALS friends that also had ALS sent it to him. He's like, hey, check this out. We should do it for ALS. And the light bulb went off over Pete's head. He's like, this is how we're going to fight this thing. We're going to turn this thing into the ALS thing. And he branded it ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, and it went viral, and it raised $250 million. It was crazy. So, that book was, a very personal, it was an incredible book. But I think it's a great story, and I hope we get to make a movie on it because it would be a really inspiring movie.
Yeah. So before we get to the books, let's just go kind of over your general. I think, for listeners who aren't as familiar with you, just a general background of like how you even got into journalism and like,
Sure.
the kind of trajectory there and how you went from, starting off, like you said, over in Taunton as your first post, and then getting to the point where you're writing books and Hollywood movies.
Sure.
Like there's a trajectory there that's probably interesting for people to hear about.
I mean, I grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts. I did pretty well. I went to Brockton High, and I always loved English. And my dad owned movie theaters when I was a little kid, and that's kind of. So I was always around the movie business, and I knew I loved it, and I loved to watch movies, and I read a ton of books, and I was like, I want to do that, but I didn't know how to get there. I had no idea. So I went to Boston College, and originally I was a business major and a marketing major, and I started getting into the math classes, and I wasn't doing great. That's not where my strength lied. But my English grades were good, so I got an English degree, and I graduated from BC, and it was the early 90s, and the job market sucked, and I had no idea what I was going to do, and I came out of college with a degree from Boston College, and I was working at a sub shop and cleaning cars.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, "Awesome, money well spent."
yeah. Boston College, for everyone. If you're not from the area, know that it's not the price of community college.
Yeah, it was it was an expensive education. So, but I knew I was going to figure it out at some point.
Sure.
And I just told my dad, be patient, man. But I ended up getting a job at the local paper in Taunton, like writing. I started off covering like local sports, just freelancing and part-time. And then the police reporting job opened up, and I got a tryout for it, and they hired me. And now I had my first full-time job, and I was covering the police beat.
So what's a tryout like for something like that? Like, what does that entail? Like, you start off, you're doing sports, and then the police thing comes up, like, and you got to.
So they want to find out if you can write and handle news, and handle breaking news, and react quickly.
Sure.
That's what they want to find out. So what they'll do is they'll give you like. You'll come in the morning, they'll give you like 2 or 3 stories, and they'll say, all right, you're covering these. We need them all done by 5 o'clock. That's your deadline. And you just work for the whole day and get them done, So I did it, and I must have done okay because I got the job. And I did that job for 4 years. And I tell people when I talk about, how I got where I am, like that job in Taunton was really where the rubber hit the road for me. That's where I kind of learned. It was almost like my boot camp.
Sure.
I learned how to cover news. It was back before cell phones, before the internet.
Yeah.
You had to go out and knock on doors. You had to go to the police department and ask for police reports. You had to go to the courthouse and pull the actual court files. You couldn't just search something on Google and find all the answers.
Yeah.
You had to go out and do stuff. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to grow up that way and learn the business that way because it served me well now that I'm older and writing books and stuff. I feel like I still report that way. I'll go knock on someone's door because you always get the story from the person, not from a document, not from something online. The story is in the people.
Yeah, the document can point you to the people you need to talk to, but then you get more of the context when you're actually sitting in the room across.
Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, man, I'm a storyteller, and I want to hear from people. I want to hear, if I'm writing a story about you, I can look up everything online and watch videos and all that, and I'll learn a little bit about who you are. But until you tell me your story, I don't know it. So that's kind of how I approach my reporting.
Absolutely, and so from there, where'd you go?
So I went.
How long did you?
So I was there 4 years, and then I moved to the paper in Attleboro for a couple of years, and I covered a lot of crazy stuff there. And then eventually in 1999, I got a tryout at the Boston Herald, and I got the job, and I worked at the Herald for 13 years, from 1999 to actually 14 years to 2013. And, I covered a lot of crazy stuff there. The first big story I ever covered was like my second or third week on the job was the Worcester cold storage fire when the 6 firefighters got killed out in Worcester. I got sent out to Worcester to cover that. So, I was kind of thrown right into the mix on that stuff.
Was there a specific department you worked in?
I was general news. So I started off in general news, and I covered there was a massacre up in Wakefield, the Edgewater Technology. A guy killed a bunch of his coworkers. Covered that story, and then I went to 9/11 that morning. I got sent down to New York as soon as the first plane hit. My boss called me and was like, "Get going." And I was like, why? And he was like, well, we think the plane went out of Logan. So I was like, all right. I knew it was a big story anyway, but now it's a big Boston story because we knew there was going to be a ton of Boston people on the plane. So I headed down. I reported from ground zero for like 2 weeks. And, obviously, like everybody, it changed everything.
Sure.
And that changed the trajectory of my life. And from there, I stayed in news for a few more years. I covered the station fire down in Rhode Island, 2003. Serial killers, corruption, scandal, all sorts of all the stuff you read in the paper. I covered every single day. And eventually I got a little burned out. And in the mid 2000s, I went into the political team. I joined the political team and I became the bureau chief at State House. And then I worked at City Hall. But at the Herald, such a small staff, you were always pulled back into the news, whatever the news of the day was. And, they knew I was a good reporter. So they just, whenever big stuff would happen, they'd be like, all right, forget that. You're doing this.
Yeah.
So 2013, April 15th, the bombs go off on Boylston Street. And I'm the City Hall reporter. City Hall's closed that day. I was just going to meet a guy for coffee. And my boss called and was like, yeah, some bombs went off at the finish line. We need you to jump in. So I kind of led the Herald's coverage of that whole thing. After the police officer got killed at MIT that night, I was home. I just got home from work. I was working 14, 15-hour days through that whole week. I got sent back out in the middle of the night after he got shot, and I ended up in Watertown in that whole shootout. So I was in the middle of that. So I, kind of led the Herald's coverage on that. And then a couple, maybe a month or two after that, my co-author, Casey Sherman, who was a TV producer that I had known from the business, got in touch. He's like, listen, I think I'm going to do a book about the marathon bombings, and I need a good reporter to help me out. What do you think? And I was kind of thinking about doing a book on it anyway. Yeah. So we teamed up, and we've been working together ever since.
Now, when you were covering the marathon bombings, you say it was like 14, 15-hour days. Like for how long? I'm sure it wasn't just that story was an ongoing story. Like how long is that? It's got to be like your life is revolving around that story for that time.
Yeah, totally.
And like how long of are you immersed in that? And
I mean, it's I always look at it like we're not we're not first responders, we're not cops, we're not firefighters, we're not EMTs, but we're not that far from that either. We kind of we work closely with them. We see them all the time, so we know them. They know us, so we help each other. They help us, and you just kind of you end up treating yourself like that. Like you're just like, their job, the cop's job is to find out the bad guys. Firefighters help the people that are hurt or whatever need rescuing. For us, it's like we got to find the people and tell the story. We got to let people know what happened. So you immerse yourself in it. And in the marathon, story in particular, the reason why it was so personal for me was, I lived in the city. I was in Dorchester. My wife was a reporter at the Boston Herald as well, and we had our son was 2 weeks old. She had just had our baby, and the city went on lockdown. Yeah. So immediately after I got the call about the bombs, I called my wife and I was like, why don't you take Jackson? He's our little boy. I said, why don't you take him and go to your mom's? Get out of the city. We don't know what the hell's going on. We're under attack. So you personalize it, but then you just, for me, I just kind of worked my way through it. Honestly, I just became, you become a workaholic and just do it,
Well, there's no choice really, because if you really want to stay on top of it, shit's breaking by the second. So the 4 hours you're asleep, there's probably shit happening that you got to catch up on as soon as you wake up.
That's right. It was a crazy time, and it was again. My wife's home with a baby, and I was no help. I'm like, she knew, but the good thing is she worked in the business, so she's like, yeah, I get it, do your thing. Like it wasn't, she didn't even say that. It's just unspoken, so she knew she was taking care of the baby for that time until it was over. And, it was hard and it sucked. And, I'm not going to lie, it was a little scary. You're out there in Watertown. I didn't know where these guys were. And I'm standing in the middle of this, the smoke around. You don't know where the hell the guys are. You don't know if they got more stuff planned. You don't know if there's bombs ready to go off, but very uncertain for everybody. But I just did my job, and that's how you can, control what you can control,
Shit, my heat just went off.
That's all right.
I usually shut it off, so that's what that rattling is. What's like, and I mean, not to jump ahead, but what's Was the marathon story, was that like the sketchiest kind of situation you've been involved in your career as a journalist or a reporter? Or
I mean, 9/11. You know what I mean? Like not so when you know, for me anyway, when I became a reporter, you know, the goal is to cover the big story. You know, you want to be on a big story, but you know, I always tell it this way. It's like, you know, all of a sudden, you know, the two biggest buildings in America are on fire, and there's people jumping out of them for their lives.
Yeah.
And I'm driving into New York, and people are driving out. And I'm trying to get down there to cover it. And it's like, at that moment, you just think, like, you know what? I wanted to cover a big story, but not this big. You know, I didn't want to cover something that big. But then it's too late, and you're just there, and you cover it. So that really kind of prepared me for the rest of my career. And so when the marathon bombings happened, I had covered some other terrorist stuff too. I covered the DC sniper. I don't know if you remember that case. You know, I had covered some other terrorist related stuff over the years. And so when the bombings happened in Boston, I was kind of like, okay, time to do it now in Boston. Yeah. And you know, you just get into reporter mode and you do it, you know?
So when you cover some of those other stories like DC or I know 9/11 is a kind of a different thing, but like how long are you out in New York or DC for? Like you know?
So for New York, I was down there for like 2 weeks down at Ground Zero, and you know, and then I'd come home, and then I got sent back for like the 1 month anniversary, and then I'd come back, and then I'd go back for the 3 month. And the thing that's interesting about that with 9/11, people forget, and a lot of your younger listeners that probably may not even remember a lot of it, there was fires that burned underground for like almost 6 months. Yeah. So when I would go back each time, you would smell that fucking fire. You know? You're down there and you're like, okay, I'm back, you know, and it's something that just never, you always remember that, you know, things like that. So I covered that for a long time, but with DC, I mean, I think I went down there for maybe like 4 or 5 days. That was a pretty short one. And I think, I'm trying to remember, it was so long ago, but I believe they caught him like right after I came back to Boston, and then I went back and covered some of it more. But with the marathon bombings, you know, I covered that for months.
Yeah, sure.
You know, you're investigating, you know, station fire is another good example. Like, you know, you cover the event, but then my job is to find out what happened, why it happened, who screwed up, who didn't screw, you know, who did their job, who didn't. And the station fire was a particularly messed up situation because there was so much that could have prevented that wasn't done. You know, there's people that, you know, there was a local inspector that like cut corners. The people who own the place cut corners, you know, and it ended up, you know, my job at that time was to dig out all those facts, like who signed off the inspections, what was actually on the walls, and it ended up they had some flammable stuff on the walls that should have never been there. The inspector should have found it, and people ended up going to jail. But people died because of that. 100 people.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of people died.
100 people. You know. And people forget there was 200 people hurt in that fire, and a lot of those people weren't. It's not like they like twisted their ankle, like they were burned, disfigured. People lost their hands. Like it was bad.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that situation. Someone who's been involved in music forever, like being in a club and like being in that situation, that's going to be, you know, people. Even the people who got out physically unscathed did not get out. Unscathed, you know what I mean?
And that was a sad one because, you know, I'm like you, I'm an old music guy, and like I kind of liked Great White. They didn't, you know, they weren't my favorite, but I didn't mind them, and you know that I knew I had friends who had friends that were there. You know, it's a small music community in New England, and you know, I knew as soon as it happened, I was like, I'm going to know people there. Like, again, I worked in Taunton, worked in Attleboro, covered music down there. That was right in West Warwick, only, you know, half hour from Taunton.
Sure.
I was like, there's going to be people there that I knew, and sure enough, there was, you know?
Yeah, and I'm sure.
Not that it matters about me, but I'm just saying that, you know, it was one of those stories where, like, everybody knew someone who knew someone. Like, if you walk around shows in Massachusetts and ask, did you know anyone that was at the station? I guarantee most people will be like, yeah, my friend or my cousin or my cousin's friend, you know?
Yeah, there's not a lot of degrees of separation for that.
Yeah.
You know?
That was a really sad one. It was terrible. And I did feel bad for the band, you know? They made a terrible mistake, and they've spent the rest of their life really atoning for it.
Sure,
Some people will never forgive them.
No, absolutely. Hold on, I'm just going to pause for 1 second. All right, I didn't mean to break momentum, but I had to pause because that the heat being on in the background was so distracting, and I didn't want people to be distracted or shut off because of that. I I hate when podcasts have bad audio quality. It's
Yeah.
a pet peeve of mine, and I don't want to be one of those guys. So
You won't be.
yeah, no. But you know, I want people to be able to not be distracted, because you're getting into some deep stuff that's important stuff in American history. You know, beyond just, you know, us talking today, is just, these are very important historical events.
Yeah, no, and that's a lot of the reason why I you know, that's the way I approach that kind of work. It's like, you know, 9/11, the marathon bombings, you know, the Patriots Day, you know, that book Boston Strong that we wrote about the bombings. Like, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, that's cool. You met Marky Mark and you worked on Patriots Day and you made a movie. It's like, I guess, yeah, but it's like, I would have rather written Star Wars, where I could go party and have fun and be like, yeah, I wrote a fucking amazing science fiction movie. But I was put in a position
something fun
to write a story that had to be told. And was it fun? Like, no, I wouldn't say it was fun. Like, it was my job, and I'm honored that I got to tell those stories. But, you know, I wasn't like popping champagne and celebrating. Like, I was sad, you know. I wish I never had to write it, but
it's a bittersweet victory, you know.
I just feel like I did my job, you know what I mean? And that, like I said, back to the, you know, first responder thing, like, when you get in a situation like that, everyone feels helpless. Everyone.
Yeah.
You know, when the city is locked down and they're looking for terrorists that have bombs, everyone's like, what do we do? And me, I had something to do. It was find out what the hell happened, try to get as much information, keep people informed. So it gave me a focus, and I kind of need that. That's just my life,
sure.
You know?
And what's crazy is, what people don't understand is, like, a reporter, you know, these terrorists are still on the streets. We don't know what the hell's going on. But, you know, like you said, the first responder stuff, you're on the streets with the first responders, you know.
Yeah, and I don't have a gun. You know?
Yeah. Did you wear body armor or anything?
I didn't for that, but I have in the past. You know, I didn't for 9/11. I had a gas mask, but I didn't end up wearing it. And you know, a lot now it's a little different with all this stuff. Like, reporters going out into the field for the riots and stuff, like, they're wearing full on body armor. They're wearing gas masks, and you know. But I had a lot of colleagues in the business, the photographers more than the reporters, because the photographers are immediately identified because of their cameras. So a lot of those guys would have bulletproof vests that they would bring. You know, they'd always have them in their car. They carry them, and you know, in the old days, in the, you know, the gang wars in Boston, the 80s, like crack wars in like the late 80s and stuff. Those guys would, you know, when Boston would have 150, 200 murders a year, those guys would wear bulletproof vests, but I never really felt the need to, you know.
Sure, yeah. And so I could see how after a while, like you said, you kind of get burnt out from that, going pretty much from crisis to crisis, because you're not covering like happy local news. You're covering kind of hard hitting shit. Yeah,
it gets you get burned out. You know, you get real burned out, and it's, you know, it's a high burnout industry. The money is not great in journalism. You know, I made a decent living at the Herald, and I was one of the lucky ones. You know, I kind of moved up over and over, and you know, I became an investigative reporter. I did like long-term investigations and stuff like that. So I have no regrets. I loved my career, loved everything about it, but you know, to sit and say it didn't take a personal, emotional toll at all would be a lie. You know, no reporter covers that kind of shit and doesn't carry some baggage. You know, my wife included, my best friends that are reporters, and you know, but it's like any other business. You know, it's like prison guards or cops or whatever. Like, you joke around. You know, gallows humor gets you through. You know,
absolutely.
And we're in the newsroom, and you know, if people ever heard the stuff that was said in newsrooms, they'd be like, "These people are a bunch of monsters." But you know, you know, one of my editors once said to me, "You got to laugh or you'll cry."
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of a true thing. You know?
Yeah. And it's not being mean spirited. It's just so that you can laugh.
Coping mechanism.
To cope. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's just humor breaks up tense situations, you know, or horrible situations, because even if you're not seeing things firsthand, you are talking to the people that experienced them, and even just hearing, I'm sure, some of the horrible shit that you've had to sit through and hear, like I can imagine that would be mentally scarring to anybody.
Yeah, it's the same. You know, therapists go through the same thing. You know, therapists sit and listen to people's worst, darkest moments day after day after day.
Yeah.
That takes a toll on them. You know, and you know, it's a weird thing what reporters do. You know, it's funny because you know, especially now, but you know, back then it was a little better. It's probably the worst I've ever seen it now, though. Like, reporters now have it worse than ever because the business is falling apart. the media has never been more hated or disrespected than right now.
Yeah.
But in my prime, when I was doing it and doing these stories we're talking about, there was still a little bit of respect for the business and the profession. And like people, a good amount of people still understood that like I'm doing a job and there's truth to be told, and people had faith in me to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Now that's gone. Like people think reporters are just liars and scumbags and they're going to make shit up and fake news and all that. And that's unfortunate because all the people that I know that work in the business are very honorable, and they're only in it. They're not in it for the money. You know what I mean? They're in it because they believe in the pursuit of truth. And I hope that people can find their way back to seeing that, are there people that engage in fake news and peddling disinformation to make money? Yeah, absolutely. Is that all the media? No. You got to be smart. You got to, the local news, pretty trustworthy. The Taunton Gazette, Brockton Enterprise, whatever, small Worcester Telegram, the smaller local newspapers. You can trust those reporters because they're making shit money.
Yeah,
they're just out to tell the truth. That's their job.
They're
not Anderson Cooper. They're not Sean Hannity.
Yeah, there's not a political bias behind it. Right. Because they're not working for a network that has a political slant and whatever. Yeah,
exactly.
That was actually before we get into that, like, just to kind of get back.
Sorry, I'm all over the place.
Oh no, and it's fine, and we'll go through it all. But just a quick question. I know you said, you guys will have like gallows humor in the office to kind of cope with the shit that's going on. But like personally, how do you shut some of that shit off and keep, work life separated from the rest of your life?
Yeah.
Because, even me working in hospitals and crazy stuff, I saw shit all the time, and horrible stuff. And, how did you kind of...
Yeah, I think it's probably the same way you did. It's kind of mind over matter. You just gotta, there was, there's a high alcoholism. There's a lot of alcoholism in the industry. There's a lot of burnout, a lot of depression. People get sick, literally physically sick. Just
worn down.
Yeah, they're just worn out. They get really tired, worn out. But for me, it was kind of like, I definitely drank more than I should have, many times in my life. And I now know at this older age that was a bad thing, but I think, most of it for me was, I was just somehow able to just, when I got home, put it away, and it's not on like a cop or an EMT or something, you deal with something bad and you can't come home and just dwell upon it, but it's hard to stop too, and then the other thing is, your phone's ringing. You're getting information. People calling you, and even if you want to shut it off, you can't because people are continuing to feed you information, and you have to feed that back to your editors and the paper. Because if you don't, your competitor will, and then you look like you didn't get the story.
Job, yeah.
And so you become a bit of a workaholic.
Sure, yeah, because the news doesn't stop.
Doesn't stop. Even though news doesn't take holidays. Doesn't take days off. It was. But like I said, I loved it. It was awesome. But I'm glad I'm not in that grind anymore. It was a grind.
Yeah. So something that you brought up, I'm glad you did, because I wanted to ask you about this anyway. As someone that was a professional journalist, what's your take on media nowadays? And I'm glad you said the small town or the local paper is still like a good trusted source. But as far as nationally, it does seem like it's very hard to find unbiased news nowadays.
It is extremely hard. But I think smart people would do well for themselves to do their homework and take the time to find the outlets that don't have that bias. And it's funny, I've been having this conversation with more and more people these days, given the state of our nation and the election and all that stuff. But I think that, you can always trust the Associated Press. The Associated Press is an unbiased news organization. They have they don't do op-eds. Yeah. They don't endorse candidates. They don't cover Democrats, Republicans. They deliver facts. Reuters, same thing. They deliver facts.
Yeah.
So I think places like that, you can find straight news, just what happened. Here's what happened,
Yeah.
And I think the local newspapers, you get a good amount of that, but then you have the Herald and the Globe in a city like Boston, or like you go to New York City, you have the New York Post, the New York Daily News, you read a story in each paper about the same incident, you're going to get two different stories because they're coming from two different angles.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of spin, but it's also style. So as a person who reads a lot, you have to just be able to read through that, and you have to use your analytical thinking to figure out what's spin, an agenda, and what's a fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I've done this for 25 years. Sometimes I have to read it twice, and I can't imagine people that aren't trained.
Yeah, like a lay person. Yeah,
just the average person. And now, you have Facebook and all that shit, and people can post anything.
I don't think social media is helping much.
It's made it worse.
It's made it a lot more volatile, at least,
You ask me the state of media. To me, the biggest problem in this country politically is confirmation bias, which is
absolutely,
anyone can Google their opinion and find some sort of news article to justify their opinion, and then put it on social media, and that's how all the fighting starts. And it's kind of awful.
Not only a news article, but they can find a group on on Facebook or something of like-minded people. So all you're hearing is from those people, and,
that's right.
and you're not hearing. I think one of the things that we're missing in the country now, more than anything, is people having debate or or just, talking shit out, or nuanced conversation. Now it just seems like people are, I think we're getting so much news now, people aren't able to digest it, and they're just reacting to headlines. Yeah. And then, or the first couple paragraphs of a story, they're not getting into the nuance of it, and they're just reacting on that and that and that. And then, no one gets to talk shit out anymore. No. And you said with the confirmation bias, they're only listening to the people that are yesing them. Yeah. And then the people that don't agree with them are now the enemy.
Right.
And you can't talk it out anymore. It's crazy.
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, JFK always said, you're loyal to your nation, not your party.
Absolutely.
People have to remember that, on both sides.
Yes.
This isn't about I'm loyal to the Democrats or I'm loyal to the Republicans. I'm loyal to the country. Like, what's best for our nation.
Yeah.
People forgot that.
I think more than anything, it seems nowadays the politicians have forgotten that.
I totally agree.
I always say that, everyone's going to stop putting the party before the country, because
absolutely
the country's suffering.
Yep. Totally agree. And I'm hopeful that will start to happen, that we've gotten through a bad time in our nation's history, and we'll move towards that. But the other thing is, with the 24-hour news cycle and, social media and, a million channels on TV, and, you can just consume details and facts all day long, nonstop. And so our new book that comes out in December is, it's the 40th anniversary of the murder of John Lennon. And Casey, my co-author, Casey Sherman, and I wrote a book with James Patterson reinvestigating that case. And we can talk about that a little bit, but it's called The Last Days of John Lennon. And
I know you probably can't talk about it too much.
I can't talk too much about it, but, working with someone like James Patterson was just an incredible opportunity. But the bottom line is that, that was 40 years ago. So, you and I kind of remember when John Lennon was killed.
You had three channels, and you got the news at 6 o'clock and the newspaper. And then
that was it. And everybody thought about it for weeks. For weeks and weeks and weeks, we sat and thought about John Lennon got killed. What happened? Who killed him? How did this happen? We love that guy. People are, now there's a news story of that scope every 2 hours.
Yeah.
We have Trump does this, and this country bombed this country, and there's a attack here, and there's this person died, and this person got indicted for rape, and drug bust here, and fire, and California's on fire. Epstein's killed in prison. And it's like the news cycle just literally is nonstop.
I know. And
so no one can ever feel anything anymore.
And on top of that,
we're numb.
And what does it take to be like a story that lasts weeks now? It has to be like major fucking disaster now.
I don't even think that does. I think that where I do have some hope is, these docuseries and the great investigative, long form pieces that have been done, like this Trial 4 that's on Netflix about the Sean Ellis murder in Boston, like cases like that are, done very well. I think the OJ, I think it was called Made in America. That was a really powerful series. I think that's the kind of stuff that can make people look at something in a bigger context. But on a day-to-day basis, these stories don't last. I mean, even Jeffrey Epstein, might be the craziest story of the last 20 years. It's already gone.
It's already gone, yeah.
No one cares anymore.
And they got his his partner there,
Ghislaine.
and that's gone out.
We
of the
may
news.
never find out what happened.
Yeah,
you know,
and it's like, oh no, we'll move that trial a year from now. What?
And I'm not, I don't want to get too political here,
Sure,
but I'm make no bones about it. I don't like Trump. I'm not a fan of Trump, but I think that everything that's happened with him, like, look, this guy was impeached. And that seemed like right now it seems like it was a million years ago. Like no one even remembers why or how it happened. You know what I mean? It's like, and then the next day it was on to something else. And then it was something else. And he fires the general and he fires this guy and he withdraws us from the WHO. We're fighting with the CDC. He's fighting with Nancy Pelosi. And it's like, it's this constant flow of chaos. And it's like no one can ever really understand what's happening,
Yeah.
And I don't blame him for that. I really don't. I blame, there's no follow-up. Because there's no appetite for it. No one cares.
Yeah, they just move on to the next thing.
What's the next shocking thing? Right after that, there'll be, Kim Kardashian did this, or this athlete, broke his leg. It's like, Twitter is a big part of it. You know? And
it almost seems like but you know what? There's also, like you said, there's kind of a backlash against that now. Like podcasts,
people are rebelling against it. Absolutely.
I never thought, even when I first started this, people were like, oh, those are too long, you got to do it. And then I get so much more feedback from people saying, oh man, it was great. Even I didn't even think that was 3 hours or whatever. Or like ones I listen to, I'm like, I have to break it up into 3 chunks, but you look forward to it. And I think people are, do have an appetite for more nuanced
100%. I totally agree. And that's a good thing.
But it's like you said, even like those Netflix series that go more deep into investigation on things. And I think, especially with things like Netflix or HBO ones or things like that, things that can be a little more unfettered from like network TV and have a little more freedom to really go into things and even show some of the ugly details or discuss it more, and I think that's been a good thing as well. I agree with what you're saying.
And I think that's where there's some hope. I mean, but
even in this too, like there's a lot of audio documentaries now that I've been, and Ian's put me on to some, and it's like that's interesting, like produced podcast style audio documentaries.
Yeah, storytelling. It's people want to be told a story, and there's a lot of people that do see through all the bullshit that we're talking about, and they don't want to be fed that every day, so they find other ways. The good thing about everything that's going on with the technology is that you can, again, confirmation bias, you can always seek out and find what you want. People are into hardcore, they're into bikes, they're into a little bit of counterculture. They can find you. They can find your show. And that's a cool thing. But what's frustrating to me as someone who's worked in media and now authors and in Hollywood for the last 20 years is like, the stuff that is mass produced and mass marketed is a lot of bullshit. Sure, a lot of it is a lot of bullshit, and people are being fed it, and they're just too lazy or too tired or too, apathetic to really look elsewhere. And it's like, okay.
Oh, that's what happens, what I mean? Because they
they just accept it and
movie based on something, and it's like,
I just think
Texas Chainsaw Massacre was loosely based on something, you know what I mean? It didn't go down like that, you know what I mean? Like,
it's easy, for the news, and the news again. I don't, my friends in the news work really hard, but they're under a lot of pressure too. Their jobs are on the line every day.
It's going to be crazy to be in the newspaper industry right now. Like
the newspaper industry is in big trouble. I mean, there's not
magazines,
a lot of jobs.
Everything,
magazines. TV news, the local TV news. I mean,
when you got 4,000 channels, like it's like almost like you understand why a lot of this bullshit's happening, and it's and they got to get your attention.
Yeah,
but it's crazy. Like
some of the local news, and again, we're talking about we're up here in Boston, so like a channel like Channel 5, has a lot of integrity. They have a lot of smart, good reporters that work really hard, and they deliver good, solid news, and that, I think that people need to just find that stuff. And if you're interested in the news and you want to find the truth, find reporters and people that you trust.
Yeah.
But
that's good though. Because I do get caught up in like the psychoticness and craziness of all this, but it is
it's overwhelming.
But it's a breath of fresh air to hear like someone that's on the inside perspective can say, look, your local news is probably a good trustworthy source. So kind of
I believe so. I mean, but even that, you do have to,
sift through a little bit.
You have to sift through, and you have to make sure that, you do your homework like you do with every, like, look, you're not going to buy a car from a car dealership that's shady. You know what I mean? You'll when you're looking into a car, you're going to read the reviews and see if it sucks, and see if there's problems with it. So, do the same thing with your news. Like if you're getting your news from one media outlet, like do a little research on the media outlet. Like who are these reporters? Where do they come from? Yeah. What are the big stories they've covered? Why do they have credibility? Do your homework.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough to tell that to guys or gals nowadays, though. You know what I mean? Because it sucks.
Yeah.
What sucks?
Who wants to do work?
Yeah, a lot of people are working 2 jobs. Well, not now. You know what I mean? But like outside of any lockdowns and whatnot, people are overworked and stressed and getting bombarded with so much media and whatnot. I
think you're right. That's why the podcasts are doing well. Is because people. They can find a personality of someone that they trust and they appreciate, and you look into some, you look into some of these that's why Howard Stern's so great, is because a lot of people connect with him. Yeah. They trust him. Yeah. They think he's telling them the truth. They don't think he's bullshitting, because he's not. Yeah.
Or even like you get into like a podcast like Dan Carlin and like Hardcore History and stuff like that. He goes, I
haven't heard that one. I got to check it out.
You got to check that out. And it's like a really highly rated podcast. And when you get into things like that, or even like guys like Jordan Peterson or this and that, like when you see that there's like academics that are, populist academics, they're not speaking above people. Mm-hmm. But when those people start to have big followings, I mean, that's always a breath of like, it makes me like stoked. Like, not everyone's just absorbing garbage all the time. That there are good messages and more interesting things getting out there.
And I think a lot of people are. I think a lot more people are in the vein of what we're talking about right now. Like, smart people see all the things that I just mentioned about the media, the flaws in the media, and they've already moved on beyond it. Yeah. And they're getting their information from other places. That they may be, listening to more music, or they're finding podcasts or different shows. There's a lot of great, like NPR, for example. NPR is another one that I would recommend to people, like, the AP. NPR, there's definitely like opinion shows on NPR. Yeah. But there's also a lot of shows that are really, really well researched, and they're, you're just getting the facts about them. And, take a look around. I think that a lot of people are finding really good content these days. You just gotta put in the work.
Absolutely. And once in a while, you just got to take a deep breath and take a step back and
go for a walk in the woods, man.
And just be like, all right, shut all this shit off for a second, so that you can come back with fresh eyes and critically look at things again and not get caught up in the muck and mire of it.
I agree. Yeah.
So all right. So you made a jump at some point where you got out of news and started getting into book writing. And, what's kind of like, what's been some of the hurdles for you? Jumping out of like, being in a news cycle into now you're getting into, you're not writing a news article, you're writing a book, which is, I know you probably, with a lot of stories, wrote a series of articles on a story, but, what's kind of like the difference, like going from doing that into like, now you got to organize it into like a tome,
Yeah, no, it's a big project, when you start these things, but I'm lucky in that, I found Casey Sherman, my co-author, and so there's 2 of us to kind of push each other and kind of, drive each other to get the story. Sure. And so Boston Strong was a bit of a, that was a bit of a fire drill to pull that together. It was, it was breaking as we were writing it. And so it was a big project.
So you were writing it as it was still going on?
Yeah, we wrote that we started writing it in early 2014. So, the trial, that book came out before the trial even happened. Okay. So we moved pretty quick on it, and we already, Patriots Day was already in production when the trial was going on. So that all happened pretty quick. But, to answer your question, I think that, once you are free of that constraint of the newsroom and having to answer the bell every time there's a big story, you can kind of focus on the story at hand. Sure. And I did that. And, it's been awesome. I've now written, Casey and I have done 5 books together. Yeah. And we've got a good partnership going, and I love what I'm doing. I get no complaints. I don't miss the daily news grind at all. Yeah. Not
to get into, you don't have to get into too depth detail about it, but what's the division of labor like when you're writing a book with someone? Because that's kind of interesting. And like, how do you decide who handles what and who's going to do what on the book?
Yeah, no, we get that question a lot. Whenever Casey and I will go out and do talks together, and that's always a question people have. So, you know, again, we're on our fifth book now, so it's pretty seamless. You know, it's like when you're in a band, like the first time you jam with a dude, like you're like, what's this guy doing? Okay, what's he doing? You can figure it out, but eventually it gets to the point where you're like, one hand knows what the other hand's doing.
Yeah.
That's where Casey and I are now. But the division of labor, you know, we'll literally break the book up into sections. Like Boston Strong was a little different because, like I said, it was a fire drill. And like I was still, when we started that book, I was still at the Herald, and then I left. So I was still covering everything. So I was just pulling together all my reporting, and then we'd get together and figure it out. But now, like for like the Brady book, for example, like Casey literally wrote the first two sections and I wrote the second two sections. So you know, with Whitey, same thing, this new Hunting Whitey book, which we'll get to in a minute. But you know, Casey wrote the first two halves and I wrote the second two halves. So he wrote about, you know, how Whitey escaped and went on the run and how he was captured. I wrote about the trial and his life in prison, and we just split it right down the middle.
Okay. Yeah.
That said, I may interview someone that may have stuff that's more relevant to his section and vice versa, and we'll kind of feed it to each other, write it up in story form, and then we edit each other. So like he edits my stuff, I edit his stuff, and then we both give it a final read over, and then, you know, then it goes to the editors. And so it's a long process, but we're getting pretty good at it.
So when you edit each other's stuff, does that help it look, does that help it make it have one like kind of coherent voice versus
It
like,
does.
all right, obviously that's Casey's section and obviously that's Dave's section, you know, so to kind of get away from that?
Yeah, it does, definitely. But we also have similar writing styles anyway.
All right.
You know, he writes in a little bit of a more narrative sort of novelistic sort of way, and I'm kind of learning from him on that because he's written 13, 14 books, you know, I'm now at 5, but you know, and I'm getting my own style now, but you know, we both write, we're telling a story about nonfiction, so we have to stick to the facts. So we can't be too creative. Yeah. But there are ways to be creative.
Well, you can't be like Hunter S. Thompson and so,
right. But we do, you know, we are, you know, when you read the Lennon book, you know, there is, and I mean, obviously James Patterson kind of, you know, he's the guy that pulled that all together. But that one was certainly a little more creative writing than anything else I've ever done. And it was fun to do. You know, it was cool to like be a little creative and imagine and, you know, use a little poetic license. Yeah.
So when you were writing Boston Strong, or when you guys were working on that, when did you know it was time to like it's always interesting for me to find when someone does like the jump. Like when did you know it was like, all right, now is the time I need to leave, you know, reporting behind, like how did you know it was?
Yeah.
Or was it more just like a leap of faith?
No, that's a great question, man. Because, you know, I had a couple of chances to write books earlier in my career. And I actually edited a book for a colleague about a crazy murder up in New Hampshire. And then there was a guy, do you remember what was his name? Oh man, there was a horrible murder. A guy killed his wife and his baby. And, you know, someone wanted me to write a book on that. So there's, but it was never anything that I was like, you know what, I'm going to take a year out of my life and just write this. Nothing really hit me in the heart like that. And I'm kind of a passionate sort of dude. So if I'm going to do that and put that kind of work in it, it's going to be something I really give a shit about. And it means something to me, and it means something to the greater good. So when the marathon bombings happened, I almost felt obligated to do it. I was like, I have all these contacts. I'm with Mayor Menino every day. I know Governor Patrick on a personal basis. I can talk to him. I know the Commissioner, Ed Davis. I can call him right now and talk to him. I know all these cops that were out there. I know all these firefighters. I know all these survivors. I just felt like I had a great position to tell the story. And I was like, people are going to write this story. I should do it because I feel like I can bring a sense of authenticity to it. Yeah. And I think we did. So that's what gave me the impetus to jump. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this book with Casey and I'll see where it goes. Yeah. And where it took me was out of the Herald.
Sure.
I was just like, you know what? I'm done with that shit. You know, time to go.
Yeah. Was it kind of hard to?
It was very hard, man. Yeah. I cried. I cried the day I left. I mean, 20 years I worked in newspapers, and it's the only career I knew.
Yeah.
And when my Herald career was finally over, that day in the newsroom was very emotional. And my wife likes to give me shit. She'll show me that picture. She took a picture of me. I was like wiping my eyes because my editor was like telling some stories, and I got a little weepy, and I was like, but you know what? Like I came of age in that newsroom. Like I had my daughter when I was, my daughter was only a couple months old at 9/11, what I mean?
Yeah.
And now she's 21, what I mean? So my son was 2 weeks old when the marathon bombings happened, and, now he's 7. So when that stuff happens and you work your way through that and you're doing the intense level of work that I was doing, you can't help but be emotionally impacted by it.
Sure. Plus, I'm sure you must make bonds with your coworkers, because you guys are in like
They're family, man.
You're in the shit together, so it's almost like.
Well, I met my wife in the newsroom.
Yeah,
we met covering stories together. We covered 9/11 together. I got sent down to New York, and she got sent to Logan, and we're talking on the phone like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "I have no idea." She's at Logan. She's like, "They just locked down the city." I'm like, "What do you mean? We didn't know what the hell was going on."
Yeah.
So when you leave. And I did that for, again, 14 years at the Herald, and made some great friends and people that are my family, like you and your work, they're just family, and everything happens. Everything's part of the journey.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm on a different journey now. That's all.
You gotta do that in life. Like, at least, like, it sounds like it was like, you knew when it was time because of the story itself, and you were going to be one of the better people to tell that story, if not the best person to tell that story. Just because of how ingrained you were, versus someone coming in from the outside trying to retrace everything. You were there from the minute. It's
funny you say that. So, it's funny you bring that up, because that was actually my biggest thought, and people can say I'm bullshitting or whatever, that I was just doing it because it was an opportunity to make money. They can say whatever the hell they want, but the truth is I was like, people are going to tell this story. I don't want it to be some dude that parachutes in from some other city, comes in here, exploits the story, makes it into some crazy chaos that it wasn't, and then goes back to their life and moves on. And I was like, you know what? I care about this story. And Casey and I talked about this. We were like, we're going to be the guys that wear this. When Patriots Day comes out, we're going to be the ones. If people don't like it, we're here in Boston. They're going to be like, Casey Sherman and Dave Wedge screwed this story up.
Yeah.
They're not going to be going after, Pete Berg and Mark Wahlberg and CBS Films who are out in Hollywood. They're going to be coming after us.
Sure, yeah.
So we felt like, we had to do everything in our power to make sure the story had integrity. The good thing about Patriots Day, and I guess I'm jumping ahead, but the good thing about Patriots Day is that, Pete Berg and Mark Wahlberg and those guys gave a shit.
Sure.
They really cared. Mark, people can, again.
The Boston guy.
Yeah, people can criticize him all they want. Oh, Mr. Hollywood, whatever. That dude still has family in Dorchester and Quincy and Braintree. Like, he's, he can't show his face around here if he screws up the marathon movie. You know what I mean? Absolutely. So he cared a lot too. And I think they did an amazing job. Was it perfect? No. Was my book perfect? Absolutely not. But it tells the story. We think it makes people feel something, makes them understand what the hell happened. And I think, 50, 100 years from now, I hope people will read my book and watch Patriots Day and understand what happened that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's when you said, some guy come in from out of town to do this story. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know New York is like this, and I know certain cities are like this, but it's a Boston story. It had to be told by Boston people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's a thing in Boston. Like, I don't think anyone would have gave it as much credibility if it was some guy from, whatever, Tuscaloosa came in. I don't want to even say other big cities, but if someone came in and told this story, it wasn't a Boston story. I don't think people would have gave it as people would have been all over that. Yeah,
no, I agree. I think that, the filmmakers knew that they needed local reporters with credibility, and so they were happy to partner with people like me and Casey. But by the same token, I don't think anyone but Mark Wahlberg could have done the story justice. Now, again, was it perfect? No. But Mark Wahlberg has the credibility in Boston and beyond. You can't have I don't know who you want to think of for, Ryan Reynolds. You can't have Ryan Reynolds come in and do that role. But I guess maybe he could. I don't know. He's a great actor.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree with you that I think that at the end of the day, the best decision was to have Boston people involved. It insulated you from a little of the criticism of cashing in, quote unquote.
Sure.
And that's a lot of as old hardcore guys like we are. You're always cautious of that selling out label and all that stuff. And for me, I mean, I get paid for my work, and I make a decent living, and I appreciate the paychecks when I get paid for my work. But I could go do other things for a lot more money. I love what I do, and I take it very seriously, and I believe that I was, I have the skills, and I was kind of put here to tell stories. Yeah. So I'm going to tell stories about what I know. Sure. I'm not going to tell stories about shit I don't know, so I'm proud of it.
Yeah. And now you have kind of more of the freedom to tell stories that you know or care about and care
Absolutely,
about.
Yeah. We're
versus
lucky.
Not just reporting on the newest thing to pop off,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's Casey and I are in a pretty good position. I mean, we've had a good run with some great stories, and we've got some great material, and now we have like a following, and so all our books do pretty well now. But I'm always looking for my next great story, and I want to continue to do stuff that I care about. I'm not doing it just here's some money, write this story about this thing you don't care about.
Yeah,
that's not where I'm at.
So it's been a pretty well. Before we get into that, but like, how did it work? From writing Boston Strong to kind of the jump, like where, that was kind of worked in the Patriots day. Like, did that, like, did the book come out first and then they saw that and then brought you guys in?
So this, a lot of your listeners should understand, like, my career trajectory is not the normal one.
Yeah.
I busted my ass for 20 years as a reporter, and like I said,
and that's why I like telling the story. I like people seeing, like, in life, you pay dues, you do things, and then it leads to different things, and you might not know where you're going, but if you kind of trust in the process, take a chance on yourself, and make the jump when you need to, like, good things could happen.
Yeah, I think I had a reputation of being a hardworking, accurate reporter. I was a grinder. I worked hard. I like to think that people thought that I was aggressive, and I would always do my best to get the story. So I think when Patriots Day came up, Casey knew that, he had a good reporter to partner with. And that was important to him because he had already built a brand for himself. He had, like I said, he had written, I think, 7 or 8 books before that. And one of them was a book called The Finest Hours, which was made into a great Disney movie with Casey Affleck and Chris Pine. It's about a Coast Guard rescue in 1953 off the coast of Cape Cod. It's like kind of a family movie. It's an awesome story, and him and this other guy wrote that book, and it kicked ass. So the Finest Hours movie had just come out when the bombings happened. So Casey was just coming off that. So he already had like Hollywood agents and all this stuff. So when he got in touch with me to do this book on Patriots Day, he was like, oh, and by the way, we're probably going to be asked to turn our book into a movie, and we'll be part of that process. So again, this is not the normal course of business for people that do what I do, but as soon as we got the deal for the book for Boston Strong, I already had a Hollywood agent, and they're still my agent today. So I was thrust right into that world in my first book, and that doesn't usually happen.
No, yeah.
But it was a huge story, and
but it wasn't like your first book, like you just got out of college and it was the first thing you wrote.
Yeah,
like
no,
you said, you already had a
seasoned
20
veteran,
year,
right. So it was like, and I just look at it like, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, I knew at a young age I wanted to write books and movies. I just didn't know how to get there.
Yeah.
And all my hard work got me to that point. And so I don't.
I'm sure there was plenty of times when you were just like working at the paper, you didn't think that was going to become, anything into doing movies, but
there was times I thought I'm never going to write a book. Like I said, there was, different books that came across, and I was like, I don't know. I don't want to do that one. And then in my head, I'm like, when am I ever going to do a book? Am I ever going to do a book, or am I going to retire and never have written a book? Because a lot of journalists do that. They spend their life thinking about writing a book, and they never actually write it. Yeah. But I'm fortunate enough that it all fell into place for me, and I, now here I am 5 books later.
Yeah.
And I'm doing, I love it. Love it.
And you're the books that you guys have written together kind of, there's not like, like there's a lot of people that are true crime writers, or there's a lot of people that are like sports writers or music writers. You guys are bouncing all over the fucking place. Like, like what's the process like? Like, how do you find your next, and you kind of started talking about this a little bit, like, and I definitely want to talk about the books themselves too. We already touched on it a little bit, but like what is like, is there a process, or like, how do you find your next story, or does just something come up and you're like, that's it, that's the one we want to move on?
Yeah, kind of that. But I think, we're always looking for a common theme, and the common theme is like underdog, or overcoming an obstacle, some sort of redemptive, feel good sort of ending, and that might sound weird with a book like Ice Bucket Challenge, where the kid got ALS and he died last year, but there was a very inspiring quality to that, where that guy took a diagnosis. Look, everyone's going to die. Every one of us, right?
Yeah.
And his family talked about this with us very early in the process. They said, Pete looks at life. This is Pete Frates, the kid who had ALS and created the Ice Bucket Challenge. They said, Pete looks at life like everyone's going to die. He's just dying a little faster than everybody else.
Yeah.
And he wants to do what he was put here on earth to do before he dies. Yeah. And that was raise awareness for ALS and find a way for people to fight this disease. And he found a mechanism through the Ice Bucket Challenge. So when we're looking for stories, we're looking for that. It's like, that's not a sad story. It's you'll cry. Like, people will read it in this sad moments. It's very sad what happened to Pete Frates, but there's also things that are like, yeah, man, like, I got to find ways to do better in life. If he's sitting here and can't move, and he's, can't even hug his own daughter, but he still has the gumption to get up every day and fight and work, and what am I crying about? You know? So it's like that sort of thing. I love that quality in stories, and I think all our books have it. The Whitey book, it's not a, our Whitey book. There's been a lot of books written about Whitey's, like the corruption, the FBI, and how he, played all the undercover cops and all that stuff. We get into a little of that, but our story is really about the FBI agents that caught him, how they caught him, and they're kind of the heroes. But it's also about how he stayed on the run, his life on the run. What was it like, and how did he die in prison? What happened to him in prison? So, we're always looking for, the story behind the story. I think.
Well, yours is interesting too, because most of the stuff that's been written about him has been like the early stuff, or like what he did and this and that. And you're kind of giving the final chapter. Yeah,
we give the greatest hits. Like, you have to understand the context. Like, the guy killed 19 people that we know of, so you have to know a few of them. But our story isn't like in 1962. Those books have been written. Our story really, it starts from the day he really went on the run until the day he was murdered in prison. So it's like you said at the beginning, it's the last chapter in the saga of Whitey Bulger. And it's another one. It's funny. When the marathon happened, I told you, I was like, all right, I'm in a kind of unique position to tell this. Well, Casey and I never wanted to write a Whitey Bulger book. We actually were like, that story's done. That story's, screw that. Everyone knows that story, whatever. But when he got killed in prison in October 2018, our agent actually called us and was like, why don't you guys think about writing a Whitey Bulger book? And we were both like, no way. It's been written to death, and then we were like, well, you know what? Someone is going to write the last chapter of this. Why shouldn't it be us? We're the Boston story guys right now.
Yeah.
We know everybody. People are going to talk to us. And that's what happened. Once we decided to do the book, the good news was, because Whitey was dead, it freed up a lot of people to talk. People that didn't want to talk before talked.
Yeah.
They weren't afraid anymore. The FBI opened up their files for us. We got over 70 letters that Whitey wrote to an inmate friend of his in Tucson, Arizona. And that guy gave us those 70 letters, and they're in the book. So when you read this book, a lot of the stuff in there is directly from Whitey himself, which has never been done before. So the book's very different.
Yeah.
And it was awesome to do. It was fun.
Yeah. So I think something you touched on, I think that's important or interesting, is that, not only you guys, the Boston guys, and tell the Boston stories, but you guys are known in the area, in the community, and people will talk to you because you've established a level of credibility and probably, obviously a level of trust with people that makes it easier for you to tell stories, because people will be more apt to open up to you. And is that something, is that something that's developed more as, along the way, as a reporter, and it's carrying over into the book thing? Or is that like something more like when you've been doing the books, you've been kind of open up, more lines there?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think, the older people like our age and older, they know me from the Boston Herald. They know I'm the guy that covered XYZ or wrote this big story. They might remember one or two stories that I did. But there's also people that won't talk to me because they remember a story I did 15 years ago, and they're like, that story was shit, and that guy screwed this guy, and so that happens too. But I think Casey and I have built up a reputation nationally now that we can tell a good story. Our books do well, people like them, and I think they're a good read, and so it opens a lot of doors.
When you talk about Whitey and stuff, and people now that he passed, people are more willing to talk about certain things. There's still guys around, from those days. Like, was there any concern on your part from any, like any repercussions from talking about any of this shit?
Yeah, there was a little bit. I mean, like the Bulger family, like they have relatives that are not happy with me and Casey about that book. They think there's something they were mad about. I interviewed Billy Bulger, the father. I'm sorry, the brother.
Yeah.
It got back to us that some of the people in the family weren't happy that we did that, but it's like, I'm going to do my job. Like that guy has a story to tell, and I'm going to try to get it. But I'll tell one quick funny story. So there's a guy named Pat Nee. I don't know if you might know the name Pat Nee.
I know the name. Yeah.
So Pat Nee was he's a gangster. You know what I mean? He's a killer. The dude has he was implicated in several murders, moving bodies around, digging up bodies, burying them. He was a bank robber, served 20 years for armed robbery. The guy was a career criminal. And when it was announced that Casey and I were doing the book, I got a call from an attorney, this guy I know, Steve Buzang, and he's like a famous kind of mob attorney. He represented Cadillac Frank Salemi and some other mobsters over the years. And Steve called me, and I had known him from my days at the Herald, and he's like, hey, Pat Nee wants to talk to you. And, I'm like, okay, what does he want to talk to me about? He's like, I can't tell you. He's like, but he wants to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. So we set up a meeting, and I met him at a sub shop in Southie, and I don't know what to expect. I don't know if this guy, I knew a little about Pat, but I didn't know a lot. What I knew was not good. And I was like, what the fuck does this guy want to talk to me about? So I made sure I got there early, and I did the old back to the wall thing. So I'm looking, I see the whole place, and I'm in this small sub shop in Southie, and all it's doing is like a little old lady, and they came in together, the lawyer and Pat. And in my head, I'm like, all right, he could be like pissed because we're writing a book about Whitey, and he might be Whitey's friend, and he might be here to send a message to me, or maybe he's got some information. I don't know. It could go either way.
Yeah.
And so, to be honest with you, like, it was a very tense experience. But within a couple minutes, he sat down and he put me at ease because he hated Whitey. And the reason he wanted to talk to me, because he wanted to shit all over Whitey and say, well, if you guys do one thing in this book, you expose what a fraud he was and a liar and he's sneak and he's not a noble gangster and all that. He wanted to dispel that myth of Whitey as the noble gangster.
Yeah.
And, it's all in the book. But
sure, yeah.
So you get those experiences. But, I sat face to face with the guy, and it was quite an experience,
Yeah, I can imagine. In whether you're doing the stuff on the Boston bombings or that or any of those type of situations, like, there's got to be some aspects of it that get a little dark or a little tense.
All the time. Yeah.
I came across something that you did a piece on like a cult.
Oh yeah. I did a few pieces on cults. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm always interested in like weird shit, like especially in Massachusetts and whatnot. What was that like?
So I did a cult. I think you're talking about the Attleboro cult.
Yeah, with the
babies.
Yeah.
That was a dark case, and that's one that we'll probably revisit in some form. I actually did. There could be a series there or a movie, but it's so dark, man, because it involves dead babies. And people don't like dead babies.
No,
amazingly.
Sure, yeah.
But
it's probably a good thing that people.
Yeah. But I covered that story. I actually covered that story when I was at the Attleboro paper. I started covering it, and then I continued to cover it when I got to the Herald, because that was one, when you asked earlier, you follow these stories through your career.
Yeah.
And that story went on for years. So what happened was there was this cult in Attleboro, and they were like kind of a fundamentalist Christian sect, and they very, no TV, no newspapers, no outside contact. They were chimney sweeps. All the guys, that was their business. They were like masons and chimney sweeps, and all the women just stayed home and reared children, and they lived off the land, and they were very like back to basics, sort of Puritan style. And one of the women had a baby with the leader of the cult, and one of the other women didn't like the woman who had the baby with the leader of the cult, and she came up with this kind of twisted vision that said, so the baby, the woman, they all breastfeed the babies, but then they graduate to table food, and this kid had already gotten to table food, and one of the women came to the cult one day at one of their meetings and was like, I had a vision from God that Karen, her name was Karen, that Karen's only supposed to breastfeed Samuel. That's all. He needs sustenance from the bosom, and so she basically delivered a message from God to this cult that she had to only breastfeed her baby. Well, anyone that's had a kid knows that once the kid's off the breast milk, they're not going back.
Yeah.
Once they get a taste of table food, they want Cheerios, they want orange juice, they want milk, and the baby wouldn't attach to the breast anymore, and he wouldn't eat, and he starved to death over weeks. So they starved the baby to death in this house that they all lived in, and they all covered it up. They brought the baby up to Maine, and they buried it. And there was a couple of babies that died during birth, like stillbirths, and those were suspicious as well. So they buried 2 babies up in the woods in Maine, and it went on for years when no one would ever say what happened. The neighbors said there was a baby there. Now it's gone. Because the baby was like 1. It wasn't
like
2
3
months.
Yeah.
So people knew, like, they had a baby, but now it's gone. But they're all still there. So DSS started looking into it, and the cops, and they knew that a baby was gone, but they didn't know why. So it was this big mystery. Yeah. And they eventually found out what happened because they were able to flip one of the women, led them to the gravesite, and they found the baby. Oof. So, and they all got charged. And actually, that cult leader and the woman who came up with the vision both got convicted of murder. It was a crazy story.
Yeah.
Man.
Now,
dark.
Were these people, like, were they born into that? Was that like an existing type of lifestyle? Like, and I'm not comparing them to like Amish or any of that stuff, but like how that is an existing thing, or was this something like where people were like part of regular society and then like dipped out and did that?
Some of them were from a family that kind of grew up that way.
Okay.
They were comparable to Amish, but they were more like Christian scientists.
Yeah. Okay.
Where they didn't believe in doctors, and they would they wouldn't take their kids to get vaccinated or checkups, anything. They believed like pray, just pray. And that's what happened. This baby's starving to death, and instead of like just giving him food, they were all like, let's pray for Samuel to take to the breast milk. Like, that's what they did. Yeah. And the baby friggin' never did, and he died. So a lot of them, there's a couple that married into the family, but most of them, the core of the group was born into the family, and the father was like kind of the overbearing dude that made them all act that way. Yeah. But the ones that married in ultimately were the ones that made the case break, because they were like, all right, this has gone far enough. This is screwed up. I gotta speak up,
Yeah, because it's just it's
wild case, man. I can't. That's funny you found that one.
Yeah, because the thing with cult stuff to me is always like, how do you even get into that shit? You know what I mean? Like, the process. So it makes sense if there was a family and that was just kind of intergenerational.
So the way it was described to me, and I talked to so many cult experts over the years for that case, and I did another one about a group in Plymouth in Vermont called the 12 Tribes. Very similar sort of group, and they were involved in some child labor. Like, they had all the kids work at their factories. Like, these kids were like 10, and they were working, they got in trouble for that, so beating the kids, stuff like that. But the way it was described to me by these cult experts is that the reason why cults are allowed to exist and kind of fester is because one or more of the people in the group are viewed as having a direct pipeline to God. Yeah. And when they, or whatever the spiritual being that they all believe in, and if they deliver a message from that spiritual being or God, everyone takes it as gospel, law, that's it. And for some reason, it's unchecked authority, and it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Being here in Freetown, we've had our share of high weirdness around here. Yep. So that stuff is always of interest. But
I covered that stuff.
Did you?
The Freetown Forest? Yeah, the Mary Lou Aruda murder. I covered that. Do you know that case?
Yeah, that's the one where they found her.
They found her tied to a tree. And I covered. So the guy that killed her was a guy named James Cater, Kater, and he had 4 trials because he insisted he didn't do it, and he kept getting hung juries and all this stuff. So I covered his actual last 4th trial, and he was convicted. It was, but that wasn't a cult thing, but it was one of those stories that contributed to the mystery of the Freetown State Forest, where there was supposedly a satanic cult that was down here, and they thought Mary Lou Aruda's murder was the result of a satanic cult, but it wasn't. It was this scumbag. And, but there was some weird shit, like they sacrificed animals out there, and some weird shit went on.
They found a couple of like weird structures that
there's some weird stuff.
Yeah. So the John Lennon book that's coming up, did you talk about as much as you can with that, or is that something?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it, not too much. I don't want to piss off James Patterson. Casey and I, again, we had just finished.
I mean, what's the crux of the book?
Yeah, so the crux of the story is, it's the 40th anniversary of the murder of John Lennon. So, guys like you and I remember it, but people, 40 and under don't really know the story. So the idea was, let's go back, reinvestigate the whole case, pull all the case files, re-interview everybody that's alive, and kind of reconstruct the whole case and tell the story of what happened, and what happened is that, John Lennon had become a recluse. He was underground. He had his son Sean with Yoko, and he was living in the Dakota, and he was persona non grata. He just stayed in the house. He was a house husband. He was done with being a wild rock star, and he was all finished. And shortly before he did get back in the studio, and they started recording the album, which ended up being his last album, Double Fantasy.
Yeah.
And before that happened, he wanted to learn how to sail. He was like doing he's kind of going through an existential crisis. He's like, let's learn how to sail. So he went down to Newport, Rhode Island, and he hired a guy to teach him how to sail. And they went on a sail, and they had a horrible storm. They almost died. They almost got caught in like a crazy storm, him and Yoko and Sean with this guy. And we actually interviewed this guy who took him on this trip.
Yeah.
And after that happened, John kind of had an epiphany. He's like, almost like, he was driving the boat in the rain and thinking they were going to die. And he was like singing, and, he had this moment where he was like, all right, life is back. I'm alive again. He had a moment where he was like, I'm alive again. And after that happened, he kind of came back into the public eye. He released Double Fantasy, started doing some interviews, started getting back into the public eye a little bit, and that's when everything happened. So this guy, Mark David Chapman, who killed him, was a loner, lived in Hawaii, and he was just this obsessive, crazy guy that he had all sorts of different targets. He wanted to kill President Carter. He wanted to kill President Ford. He wanted to kill Todd Rundgren, a 70s rocker, just all these weird people.
Random,
I think Orson Welles was one of the ones that was on his list. He just had all these old, he wanted fame. He wanted to find someone famous to kill, and he ended up settling on John Lennon.
Yeah.
And we kind of tell that whole story about how he came to settle on Lennon and what happened that day.
See, I didn't know that I didn't know that. Like, he had a whole hit list of people. So did this, probably because you don't want to get into spoilers or specifics, but did this reinvestigation uncover new stuff or any big things?
I think so. I don't want to say there's any major reveals because, the case has been covered ad nauseum, but I think we pull together the whole story and tell it in a way that people have never heard before. Sure. And it's, we definitely, found, we dug out a few nuggets that I think people will, some people will know, but I think most people won't, like a lot of things about Mark David Chapman's history and a lot of things about John Lennon's history. And we do have some, some fresh interviews with people like Paul McCartney that we got to interview and some other folks that, witnesses to the case. We talked to the lead investigator on the murder. We talked to the prosecutor. We talked to Chapman's attorneys. And I think all of them bring, kind of like the Whitey book, like Whitey's dead, so people can talk freely.
Yeah.
It's 40 years, so they're like, all right, I can tell my whole story now. It's been 40 years, and they kind of took the handcuffs off and told us the truth. So I think there is some new perspectives in there.
Yeah. So you think with time that just kind of happens, people just feel a little more removed from it and are a little more comfortable talking about the whole thing, you know, because obviously there's not anything major that's going to bite someone in the ass with that, you know, now, you know, maybe, you know, but I
think there's that, but there's also, you know, with age comes new perspective, you know, and, you know, people get older and the things that were important to them when they were 20 or 30 or 40 are not as important to them when they're 40, 50, or 60, you know, and they look at things through a different lens. Life is different to them. So when they tell the story now at this age, it's you know, it might have a different levity, you know?
Now, is it, and this is not, I'm not trying to be devil's advocate here, but it's just a legitimate question. Is it harder to get people back into that frame thinking about that thing, those things that happened 30, 40 years ago? And like, you know, is it like, you know, do you have to do more research, like kind of like double checking facts to make sure, like, you know, what someone's memory might be like 40 years later versus like if you asked them 20, you know, like if you ask me something 10 minutes from now, I might have a different answer. You know what I mean? You know, never mind, you know, decades passing. Is that something you guys like have to really do diligence with? Yeah,
I think, you know, you want to check the veracity of the information, you know, and, you know, make sure that they're not telling you something that's impossible, you know, so, you know,
not that they would even, meaning not that they're doing it on purpose.
It would be accidental, obviously, but we certainly vetted all the information that we had as best we could, and you know, you cross-reference everything. You know, one thing Casey and I do is, you know, we don't leave any stone unturned when we write our books because, you know, we're kind of nerds about it. Like we want to nerd out and just find out everything about it. Like, you know, we went down to New York. We spent, you know, a ton of time down in New York for this book, and you know, we went and sat at Central Park and had lunch and just, you know, there was actually Beatles music that came on the, you know, the speakers at the place we were at. And we just sat there and kind of like, you know, talked about the story and just kind of nerded out about the Beatles, you know. And I think, you know, when we write our books, we try to get into the story as much as we can.
Sure.
And that includes researching all the past information and comparing it to the current.
Yeah. And is it hard to get at someone like Paul McCartney to do
Yeah,
this?
It wasn't easy. It wasn't, you know, we tried to, you know, Ringo wouldn't talk to us.
Really?
We made contact with him and he responded, but he was just like, I can't, you know, he didn't want to talk, but we had to jump through some hoops to
I can imagine,
But, you know, for the Brady book, you know, we got Brady, and that wasn't easy either, you know. And you know,
I feel like that's a little easier just because, you know, at the time he was still around here, you know what I mean?
True. Yeah, that's true. But you know, but you know, that's also part of the fun of writing these books is who can we get, you know? And you know, with the Whitey book, for example, you know, we were like, we should try to get Billy Bulger, and I was like, all right, I'll go to his house, and that's how I ended up getting him. I just went to his house, knocked on the door. I knew where he lived, just knocked on the door, and he answered. Yeah, he knew me though, you know, because I had covered him when he was at the State House in Massachusetts. He was a state senator, and he was like, "Hello, David," and I was like, "Mr. President." You call him Mr. President because he's Senate President. I was, how you doing, Mr. President? I said, you know, told him what I was doing. I'm here writing a book about your brother, and he was murdered. I'm very sorry for your loss, and would you like to talk? He said, sure, come on in. Invited me in. I sat at his kitchen table for an hour and a half. Yeah. So, you know, you never know. You know, these interviews can happen or they don't. Yeah. So, you know, like when any of these books come out, obviously there's some controversial stuff in there. Has there ever been any big like blowback on or any big kind of like ramifications on that or from any of that for you guys? We've made a lot of news with our books, but we've never had, you know, I want to get some wood around here. Dude. Knock on wood. I'll knock on this metal here. But
the bench you're on, bench you're on.
Oh yeah, there we go. But, you know, we think we do our homework enough that, you know, even if someone was upset about something that we wrote, they're not going to say it's not true. And we can, you know, we can always fight back on why it is. And, you know, we haven't had any, you know, any major blowups like that, you know, but like the Brady book, for example, we had some big news in there that, you know, he found out, about Kraft dropping the appeal from the TV. He didn't know. You know, Kraft never called and was like, we're dropping the appeal. He was sitting at home watching TV and he saw it. dropping the appeal to the Deflategate
sure.
case, and that was a big deal to Tom. He was like,
of course, yeah.
He was like, "What the fuck?" He's like, "I've been a great company man, and you guys are just throwing me under the bus." Like, He was pissed,
and how much he did for that team, and they're not going to stand behind him.
Yeah. He was pissed, and him and Kraft, they had a rocky relationship for a little while because of that. They repaired it. And another thread in that story is that Tom's mother was going through cancer that season, and so him and Kraft kind of bonded over that because Kraft had lost his wife to cancer, and that's kind of how they rebuilt the relationship. Was they bonded over the family illnesses, and ultimately him and Kraft fixed their relationship, but him and Belichick really didn't.
Yeah, well, it's hard not to feel betrayed in that type of situation,
Well, at the end of the day, they're all professionals, and I think it's one of those things where, like, you can still respect someone and what they do for a job, but you don't have to love everything they did.
Yeah, absolutely. You covered a lot of music in the past too.
Yeah.
Like, I know, you just got into the John Lennon thing. What's been some of the highlights for you in your career as a journalist in regards to music stuff?
Oh man, I mean, there's a lot. How long you got?
Well, what are some of the standout moments for you? Just to kind of get on a more lighter note a little bit.
Yeah,
we've been
absolutely.
talking some heavy shit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I wrote every paper I was at. I kind of wormed my way into the music section to cover stuff that I like to do, and.
Was there like freedom for that? Like, if you were the press guy and you're covering a murder one day and you'd be like, I want to do a record review one day.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The way it happened was I didn't know you could do that. But what happened was that when I was at the Taunton Daily Gazette down in Taunton, Massachusetts, I was the news reporter. I was a police guy. But they would post a listing of all the concerts at Great Woods every season. Great Woods is the amphitheater near Taunton. And I asked one of the coworkers, I was like, "What's that?" They're like, "Oh, well, the Great Woods gives us press tickets for every show, and if you want to cover one and write a review, you can go to the show." So I was like, "Hell yeah!" This is funny, actually. So I went to sign up, and everything was gone. Like, everything was already taken. The only concert that was available was Yanni.
Yeah,
Yanni,
the new
avant-garde, new age dude. So I was like, screw it, I'll do it. It was my first one. I had never covered a concert. I had gone to concerts, but I had never written a review or anything. So I went to Yanni. I got 2 tickets. I brought a buddy of mine, and the show was awesome, dude.
Yeah.
It was like a really good show. And I was like, I don't like this music, but I can't give it a bad review. Like, the guy's great at what he does. You know? So I wrote a great review of Yanni. And, And from there, I kind of learned that, like, there was ways to kind of work the angles to get to shows and interview people that I thought were cool and wanted to do. So after that, I kind of made friends with the woman who ran the features department, and I was like, "Listen, I'd love to do more stuff like this." She's like, "Absolutely, I need the content." So I started doing features and all that, and so you asked, what are some of the highlights of what I've done? When I was at the Taunton Gazette was 1994, I believe it was. Kiss put their makeup back on.
Yeah,
and I was a big Kiss fan growing up. As a little kid.
Yeah,
and I got
any kid in the 70s was probably a Kiss fan at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, there's no email, there's no internet back then. So I would get mail and I got a press kit from Kiss just randomly because they had seen that I reviewed music over the years, or for a year anyway. And I got a press kit from Kiss, and it was like, a black and white photo of Kiss. And it's like a press release that said, like, Kiss putting the makeup back on at Boston Garden. I think it was the Fleet Center at the time. And they're like, interviews available. So I immediately called the guy, and I was like, yeah, I want to cover the show, and I want to interview Kiss. And the guy was like, all right, great, we'll set it up. Sets up an interview with Gene Simmons for me.
Yeah.
So this is a great story too. So I'm sitting there. So my job at that time was I had to come in at like 5:30 in the morning, and I had to go to the Taunton police station and the Rainham police station, read all the police reports from the night before. If there was a big story, go write it for the paper. The paper came out at like 11 in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I would have to go to the courthouse and cover all sorts of other stuff and all that. So for some reason, the interview was set up for like 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Because Gene was in New York, and he liked to do his interviews in the morning. So I'm sitting there, I'm on deadline. I'm writing about like a robbery or a fire or something. My phone rings. I'm like, Dave Wedge, Taunton Gazette. And he's like, hi, this is Gene Simmons. And I was like, Mr. Simmons. I was like, I forgot we had this interview scheduled. I was like, I'm in the middle of another story. Would it be possible for you to call me back in like 20 minutes? And he goes, no problem. And he goes, thanks. And he hangs up. Finish my story, 20 minutes, Gene Simmons calls me back. Consummate professional.
Yeah.
So, you know, such a smart guy. And, you know, there's a lot of things people don't like about Gene Simmons, but it was just, that was a moment in my career where I was like, you know, I realized the professionalism of some people. Like Gene Simmons is one of the biggest rock stars in the world, but he's trying to sell his new band, putting their makeup back on. They weren't getting a ton of press then. And he was smart enough to know that, like, even some small little shit, tiny town paper is worth doing the press. He just knew it was important because there was no, again, there was no internet. And I ended up doing a big giant story. I think they put it on the front page with, like, you know, picture of Gene Simmons and all that. And I went to the show, and afterwards he actually sent a thank you note and was like, thanks for the coverage. Like, I was amazed. So things like that. You know, I got to interview Ozzy a couple of times.
Oh yeah.
He was cool. Yeah, he was cool. And Lemmy, I interviewed Lemmy.
That's awesome.
Yep. I interviewed Notorious B.I.G.
Oh, really?
Which was pretty cool, yeah.
How did that go?
Wild. That's a wild story. Again, how long you got?
Yeah, yeah.
I actually told this story.
How long you got, you know?
Well, I told this story on your brother Lord Willen's podcast.
Oh, yeah.
The short version is I was friends with the publicist for Bad Boy, and you know they were a subsidiary of like a larger label.
Yeah.
So the larger label PR guy used to send me stuff from Bad Boy, be like, check this dude out. So this sent me a package. And again, it all came in the mail. It was 1994. And he's like, you know, you got to check out this dude, you know, Notorious B.I.G., you know, Biggie Smalls. He's the next big thing. I've heard that 100 times.
Yeah, of course. You hear that.
I listened. He sent me Ready to Die. And I listened and I was like, holy shit. I was like, this shit is dope. You know, this is good. And he's like, he's playing in Providence, you know, this night, you want to go? And hooks me up with a couple tickets. I bring my buddy, and he's like, do you want to interview him after the show? And I was like, yeah, sure. So he sets it up, and he's like, after the show, go to the side stage and find Sean. And Sean, Puffy, you know.
Yeah.
And no one knew who he was at the time. I didn't know. It was just his manager. So show ends, and I go find Sean, and Sean's like, yeah, man, come around the back, and we'll do the interview on the bus. So I'm like, all right, cool. So we go around to the back on the bus. You know, I'm waiting outside, and no biggie. And then Sean comes back and he's like, you know, we're actually going to do it at the hotel. So go to the hotel. And he sends us to the hotel across the street. So we go back there. Now it's like, you know, 2 a.m.
Yeah.
It's like a Tuesday night. I got to work the next morning.
Yeah. At like 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah, like 5:30 in the morning to cover the police. I got to go see the cops in the morning.
So basically, you're going to leave that interview and go right to work.
Go home, sleep for like an hour, and then go home. So, and I said that to my buddy. I'm like, dude, I got to get up at like 4 hours. He's like, come on, man, come on. So we hung out. And we're hanging out in the hotel room. He tells us the room number. We're waiting in the hallway. And all of a sudden, you know, they come walking down the hall, and it's Sean and Biggie. And I don't really know who he is, but I figured it out. And they're arguing. They were fighting about money. And Biggie was like, I got a coach coming tomorrow, motherfucker. He's like, where's my money? You know, he's like, and Sean's like, it's coming, Big. And don't worry about it, man. And they're like fighting about money. And they come up and they're arguing like heated. And then they come up, and there's me and my friend, and there was like a girl from like the Brown University newspaper, and there was like a dude from like the local radio station. Yeah. And he's like, he instantly turned into like a pro again. He was just like, hey, what's up? How you guys doing? You know, come on in. And opens the door, and we sit down and we start, you know, interviewing. You know, he's going around the circle, you know, answering questions and all that. And all of a sudden, Little C's from Junior Mafia comes in, and he throws a big giant bag of weed on the table, and he spins up a big giant blunt and passes the blunt around. I'm not a big weed smoker, but you know, that night I was, you know, he's like, you know, I was sitting next to Biggie, and he like sitting there puffing on the blunt. He just handed it to me, and I'm like, I'm not going to not smoke it, you know? So I just, you know, take 2 and pass. And it was just a great night. And he was just a really down to earth dude. And, you know, he talked about his wife and his daughter, and he talked about the pressures of the industry, and, you know, talked about the East Coast, West Coast, and the fighting and all that shit. But I found him to be really intelligent and passionate and smart. And, you know, it was quite a moment. And then, you know, he died shortly after, and I was like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. But that's it's important. Some of the best things in life is just sticking it out and being there. you know, and you never know. Like, you never know when that's like a moment that, you know, it sucks you lost some sleep that night, but that's like, you know, some historical
Wouldn't trade
shit.
it for the world. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, and that's important, man.
I've had a lot of moments like that where I seize the moment. You know, I think I'm a big believer in that. You know, like, you know, if I put it this way, you know, 9/11, you know, that morning, I could have told my boss, you know what, I can't go down there.
Yeah.
You know, I got something I got to do this weekend, and you know, my wife, I could have made up some shit, you know, but I knew it was an opportunity to cover history.
Yeah.
So I just was like, I got to go.
Yeah.
And I went. Everything goes aside when that shit happens. Everything, you know, daughter, family, everything, and that's not fair, but it was all part of my journey.
Yeah.
You know, it brought me to these books, you know?
Absolutely. But like you said, it's probably a good thing that your wife's in the industry.
Yeah.
Kind of understands, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Like, you know, you know, what comes with the job, you know?
Yeah, she did, you know, but it's still, you know, sometimes she'll be like, why do you got to do, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes the book, she's like, why do you got to do, and I'm like, you really asking me that? Like,
Yeah.
you know why, you know, and then she's like, I know, all right, just be careful, you know?
Yeah.
You know, so again, I'm not going out into war here, but
Sure,
you know,
yeah.
I definitely I go the extra mile for the story.
Yeah.
I don't put myself at personal risk, I don't think, but you know, I gotta.
Yeah, well,
you
there's
gotta
some
work
things
hard,
you
man,
don't know
know?
if you are or not. Like you said
just
with the
don't know.
bombing, like no one in the city knew what the hell was going on. Like, you know, like there could have been bombs anywhere. They were putting them in
just don't
garbage cans and crazy shit. Like, you know, who the fuck knows, right?
Yeah, you just don't know.
But yeah, man. Anything else that, you know, that we haven't touched on that's important? I mean, we talked about a lot of interesting shit. Man. I mean, it's like a you know, and I would love to continue conversation down the road when other shit comes out. But you know, you don't have the typical journey. You know what I mean? And you've been
Neither do you.
Yeah, no. But that's why it's interesting to talk. You know, like But what I was going to say is that, like, you know, it's always interesting. I love showing that to people that, like, you know, there's things in life that, like you said, you got to seize it, you know, and you're responsible for your path.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you ain't happy in your day job and there's other shit you want to do. Like, you don't know where it's going to take you unless you take the chance. You might fail, but then you find some other shit. You know what I mean?
No, it's, you know, I've just always found that, you know, there's no time like the present. Don't say no to any opportunity.
Yeah.
Take a shot. You know, the old say, you know, my dad's an old sports guy, and, you know, the old saying is, you know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
Take a fucking shot. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the way I've lived my life. And you know, am I a millionaire? Am I perfect? Am I great? No, I'm not. But I love what I do. Every day is fun. Every day is an adventure. And you know what? If it's not, then I can go change it. You know, we're in charge of our own destiny. A lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah.
We are. And it's, you know, it's never easy, I guess, you know.
No.
And my journey wasn't easy, but, you know, it's easier now. But I had some hard times, you know, when I was younger, and, you know, times where I was like, shit, you know, I'm working in a business that I put my whole life into and it's falling apart, the newspaper business. And I was like, what have I done? What am I going to do? And all my friends are working at finance firms making six figures and buying houses, and I'm living in a shitty apartment in Brockton.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, but it's all part of the journey. So
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, I'd love to come on again. Next time I want to interview you, though.
Yeah. Hey, so just out of curiosity, like, you know, you go from working a paper where there's like a routine, and then, you know, and then there's crazy shit popping up that, but, you know, like you said, like you might have to go to the police station in the morning, the courthouse in the afternoon, but you kind of know what you're going to do. And then if some breaking shit comes, you got to cover that. But now going into like where you're doing your own thing, your books, like, do you find that you have to like kind of maintain like a schedule, or like a, you know, like, do you have to, because now you're responsible for your own shit, like you can, you know, like whether, you know, so do you have like a writing schedule, or do you have like something you stick by to kind of like
a little bit? I do. I try to, you know, but admittedly it's hard. Like there's days where I'm like, oh man, I just don't feel like doing this today. And like, I'll go outside and like clean the yard or rake some, you know, do something else, or make some food, you know, for the kids or whatever. But, you know, I think it's like you know, it's like, you know, you gotta be disciplined to yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, I know when my deadline is, and if I don't meet it, I'm not getting paid, and I can't pay for my bills. So I got to get it done. So I always get it done. And if it means I have to work at 3 a.m, I'll get up at 3 a.m, you know, and I'm a little bit weird like that where I'm not a creature of habit. I'm all over the place. Like,
Are you a need the pressure guy?
yeah,
Yeah.
I am. And I'm real weird. Like, I'm like, I won't sleep, but then I'll sleep. You know what I mean? Like, I'm all over the place. It's really based on need, you know?
Sure.
If things are slow, I guess maybe this is the way to put it. Someone told me once in the newspaper business, like, if it's slow, let it be slow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I kind of live my life that way. Like, it can always be busy, and it usually is. But when it's slow, let it be slow, man. Like, just chill and enjoy that downtime. So
you need a recharge period.
You need a recharge, yeah. And vacations are good. You know, I like to get outside. I'm a big skier. I get out in the woods and shit, and you know, try to get some downtime. Go for bike rides with my kid. You know.
You still active in music at all? Like listening?
Well, I was before all this, you know. I mean, I was going, you know, it's funny. This is the first year of my life since I was 13 that I won't go to a show, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't go to any shows before this shit started.
I said that same exact sentence, I think, with the exact same age, just to somebody this week.
13?
I was like, this is the first time since I'm 13 where I've gone probably a whole year. The last show I saw was Murphy's Law in March.
March of 2019?
Yeah. It's probably the last show in Boston.
Yeah.
Literally the all the shutdown stuff was happening the next day.
Oh, you went in 2020.
Oh,
March.
2020.
Yeah,
2020, yeah.
I didn't go to a show in 2020. I hadn't made it to any shows yet. I saw my buddy's band play, but it was like a bar thing. But the last like show I went to was I saw the Pixies at Big Night Live in Boston in like December of 2019.
Yeah.
So no shows this year. So that's a bummer. But in answer to your question, I mean, I'm not writing a ton of music these days, like writing for music publications, but every now and then someone will be like, hey, you want to do a piece? And I'll do something. But I try to stay up on everything. You know, I listen to a lot of everything. You know, lately I've been listening to like, I don't know, like I listen to some hardcore, I listen to some metal, like I'm a big like Behemoth guy.
Sure.
I've been listening to
Behemoth's one of those bands, like you said. I'm not comparing them to Yanni at all.
Yeah.
But I was never a big Behemoth guy. But then I went to go see him because At the Gates and Behemoth played. It was like a year and a half ago.
I was at that show, yeah.
And literally their stage show and what they put into that show like converted me. I was like,
it's insane.
I was like, this is fucking crazy.
Insane.
Like,
you know what? I saw them, Behemoth opened up for Cannibal Corpse, and I'm a big Cannibal Corpse guy. Like, I love that speed metal and thrash and shit.
Yeah.
And like, they just after Behemoth ended, it was like the room was empty. You know, it was like they just sucked all the energy out of the room. And like Cannibal Corpse, as powerful and as energetic as they are, they couldn't match that level of intensity.
Yeah.
Behemoth's legit, like with their live show.
Oh,
it's intense, you know. And
and since then I've heard interviews with
Nurgle, smart dude,
smart guy, and literally the passion for what he does, like, you know, wanting to deliver. That's something that like I hold a lot of respect for. When like someone's like a real takes the music so serious that like and what they're putting out there, like people are like, no, that's control freak stuff. I'm like, no, that's someone that's like really
dedicated to his craft,
his craft, and
it's
wants
like
to make sure that it's going the right way.
Like, I'm sure sometimes you're the mad scientist back there in the shop, you know, but I'm, you know, trying.
Sometimes I'm just a mad guy.
I'm trying to listen to as much music as I can, you know, like I'm trying to find new music. I'm rediscovering old music, and you know, I think this is a time, you know, we haven't talked much. I don't want to get too, you know, pontificating here, but you know, we're in a pandemic and we have a lot of time to reflect. I think people should be appreciative of that time.
Absolutely.
And try to find new things to occupy that time that matter to you. Like it's the kind of time where, you know, think back to before the pandemic, every day was scheduled. You had like a meeting, you had a dinner, you had birthday party, you had a wedding, funeral, whatever the fuck it was. You were constantly going. We don't have that anymore. So like, use that time, you know, expand your mind, read shit, watch shit, listen to shit, create shit. Yeah.
Learn new skills, do something. Yeah. Cause I don't think ever in life are we going to have a time where there's like so much time to do that. Yeah. Like for me, I didn't shut down a day here. So it's a little different, you know, and a lot of people I don't, but there's a lot of people I know that weren't able to work because their job shut down and they were going crazy or they were doing that. They were like, all right, taking this time to like get into new shit or learn
That's
new
what
shit.
it's a time for. Yeah, it's a time for hobbies. It's a time for, you know, projects. And I think most people are figuring that out. But you know, I do hope that, you know, all your listeners are maximizing their time and
Absolutely,
and being
man.
safe, you know?
Yeah. Because if there's a second round of it, like if you didn't do that on the first time, and if you just sat there playing PlayStation next time, you're like, there's probably another one
PlayStation's pretty awesome, though.
Yeah, no, yeah. If you know, don't worry about getting a PlayStation 5. Worry about like fucking developing some new shit. Unless you want to be a video game person, you know. But are you do you do any side work, like meaning like outside of books? Are you still like writing pieces here and there for news?
I freelance occasionally, and I do a little consulting too. Like I do some political work. Like I have some political clients that I do some work for. You know, I'll help them write op-eds or content for their websites, or deal with the media for them, things like that.
Yeah.
Kind of a hired gun as needed. And I'm like you, man. Like I wear a lot of hats, and I just try to stay busy, and I try to use my mind every day and
use different parts of the brain.
Yeah, just try to bring my skills to where they can be used. And I got a kid in college, and I got a 7-year-old, so I'm pretty busy with that.
You're pretty
too,
busy anyway. Yeah. Absolutely, man. Well, hey, where can people find out more about you, like at websites or social media or anything?
Yeah, so the website for our production company, where we post all the news about our books and movies and all that, it's fortpointmedia.com. That's the name of our company, Fort Point Media. But, people want to hit me up personally. Like I post a lot of my stuff on there too, Facebook or Instagram. I'm at David M. Wedge, or I'm on Twitter at Dave Wedge. So people check it out.
Yeah. And
say hello.
I'll put all that in the show notes too, to make it easier. Because sometimes you go by Dave, sometimes you go by David. So my name, my real name is David, but my author name is Dave, and so I'm always at Dave Wedge. But Instagram Dave Wedge was already taken, so okay.
I had to go at David M, because that's my real name.
Yeah, so you had to get more professional with this.
I guess so.
Whatever. Yeah,
but it's always Dave, man.
Yeah. Well, fuck yeah, man. This was a great talk, and I look forward to doing another one down the road when you got more stuff coming out and talking more about that.
Same here. I wish you luck with the podcast. We got a lot of friends together, and I'm glad you're doing this, and it's good stuff. So keep it up.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. I'm gonna sign off here right now.